There are places on this earth that hold stories, not just in books, but in the dust itself. If you travel deep into the Gobi Desert, where the wind scours the sand into endless waves, you might find one such place. At first, it looks like nothing, just the ruins of mud walls, crumbling under the vast, empty sky. But this is what remains of a city that was once alive, bustling with people, filled with color and noise. A city that stood for centuries, a vital stop on the most famous trade route in history, the Silk Road. This place was called Khara-Khoto, the Black City, and for over 600 years, it has been silent, holding on to its secrets. What happened here? Where did all the people go? This isn't just a story about ruins, it's a story about life, about a world that vanished, and about how sometimes the desert doesn't forget. Before we can understand the silence of Khara-Khoto, we have to understand the sounds of the world it was born into. The Silk Road wasn't really a single road. It was more like a great network of veins stretching across the body of the earth for thousands of miles. For more than 1,000 years, this was the world's lifeline. From China to the Mediterranean Sea, everything moved along these paths. And it wasn't just silk. It was spices that would change the taste of a meal a world away. It was glass, paper, precious metals. But the most important things carried along the Silk Road were invisible. Ideas. Religions, like Buddhism, traveled from India and found a new home in the East. Art styles blended. Stories told in one village were retold in another, hundreds of miles away, translated into a new language. It was the world's first great meeting of cultures. And to be a part of it, to live in a city on this route, was to live at the very center of the world. Now, imagine you are a merchant. You've been traveling for weeks. Your camels are tired, your water is low, and the desert feels like it will never end. Then, on the horizon you see it. High, thick walls. Towers. A promise of safety, of a warm meal, of fresh water. That was the promise of a city like Khara-Khoto. It wasn't just a random settlement. It was built in a perfect spot, right on the edge of the Etsin River, a ribbon of life flowing through the harsh desert. This river was everything. It watered the fields, it gave drink to people and animals. Without it, there could be no city. The people who built this fortress were called the Tangut. They were a strong, proud people with their own unique culture, their own complex writing system, and their own kingdom. For them, Khara-Khoto was a jewel, a key military outpost, and a thriving center of trade. It was their window to the world, and the world's window to them. Let's step inside those walls. The year is, say, 1200. What would we see? The streets are narrow, packed with people from a dozen different lands. You hear the Tangut language, but also Chinese, Mongolian, Persian. The air is thick with the smell of cooking fires, of spices, of camels and horses. A craftsman is carefully painting a scene of Buddha on a silk banner. His work will end up in a monastery hundreds of miles away. In the market, merchants haggle over the price of jade or tea. Children run through the alleys, their laughter echoing off the mud brick walls. This was a deeply spiritual place. The Tangut people were devout Buddhists, and the city was filled with temples and stupas, cone-shaped shrines. Their art was incredible. It shows a people who thought deeply about life, about death, and about what comes after. They created books using complex printing techniques and wrote down their laws, their poems, their histories. This wasn't a primitive outpost. It was a sophisticated, vibrant city. A place where people fell in love, raised families, worked, and worshipped. It was a home, and they must have felt that it would last forever. But it didn't last. In the 13th century, a storm was gathering on the steppe. The Mongol Empire, led by Genghis Khan, was on the rise, sweeping across Asia. Khara-Khoto, being a strategic city, stood right in its path. The city was attacked. It fell, but it survived. For another century, it lived on under Mongol rule, still an important hub. But something was changing. The old world was shifting. And then, in the year 1372, the end came. The historical records are sparse. They tell us the Ming dynasty of China laid siege to the city. But it's the legend that tells the human story. The legend says the enemy couldn't breach the high walls. So they did something far more clever and far more cruel. They found the Etsin River, the city's source of life, and they diverted it. They cut off the water. Imagine the terror inside those walls. Watching the river that fed you, that nourished your children, just disappear into the sand. The wells running dry. The choice must have been unbearable. Stay and die of thirst, or leave everything you've ever known and walk out into the hostile desert. The city's general, the story goes, knew the end was near. He is said to have buried his family's treasure, killed his own wife and children to spare them from the enemy, and then rode out to meet his death in a final, hopeless battle. We don't know if the legend is true, but what we do know is that after 1372, silence. The people of Khara-Khoto walked away, the city was abandoned, and the Gobi Desert began to reclaim it. For 600 years, Khara-Khoto was just a memory, a name on old maps. The sands piled up against its walls, burying its streets, preserving its secrets. Then, in the early 1900s, a new kind of explorer came to the desert. They weren't looking for silk or spices, but for knowledge. One of them was a Russian explorer named Pyotr Kozlov. He had heard the local stories of a black city lost in the desert. In 1908, after a long search, he found it. He stood where we are now, looking at these same ruined walls. He and his team began to dig, and what they found was breathtaking. It was a time capsule, because the desert is so dry, things that would have rotted away anywhere else were perfectly preserved. They found books, thousands of them, written in the lost Tangut language. For the first time in centuries, the world could read their stories, their laws, their poems. They found stunning works of art, brightly colored paintings on silk and paper. They found everyday objects, a game piece, a woman's hair comb, a child's toy. These small things, they close the distance of centuries. They remind us that the people who lived here weren't just figures in a history book. They were real. They had hopes and fears and lives as complex and meaningful as our own. Kozlov's discovery brought Khara-Khoto back to life. Today, the walls of Khara-Khoto still stand, a lonely monument in an ocean of sand. The river is long gone. The voices are silent, but the city is not truly empty. It stands as a powerful reminder, a reminder of how brilliant and creative we can be building great cities in the harshest of places, but also a reminder of how fragile it all is, how everything can depend on something as simple as a river or on the winds of political change. The Silk Road itself eventually faded, replaced by sea routes and a changing world. But its legacy, and the legacy of cities like Khara-Khoto, is still with us. It's in the art we see, the ideas we share, the interconnected world we all live in today. The story of the Black City is a human story. It's about our constant struggle to build, to create, to connect. And it teaches us that even when a city falls, even when it is buried by the sand and forgotten for centuries, its story can survive. We just have to be willing to listen for its echo in the wind.